Hello guys, welcome to Movie Recap English. What if your new neighbor started living out a tragic love story, just like in a classic novel? Today we're explaining Gemma Bovery, where fiction and real life dangerously collide. You won't believe how it ends. Once, Martin Zoyer lived in Paris and enjoyed the aesthetics of the old city. He adored art and literature and was especially fond of the works of the famous realist writer Gustave Flaubert. But 6 years ago, Martin returned to Normandy to take over his father's bakery, the main attraction of the small town. One day, however, a new batch of pastries turned out to be burnt, which surprised and angered his wife, Valerie. Martin explained that he was very concerned about the condition of his neighbor, Charlie, and feared that he might harm himself. After work, he immediately went to the neighbor's house and caught Charlie throwing his late wife's belongings into a fire. Martin managed to retrieve the woman's diary before the flames destroyed everything. It all started 6 months ago. While working in his garden, Martin noticed a car pulling up to the neighbor's house. The new residents turned out to be a couple from England, Charlie and Gemma Bovery. Hearing the surname, the baker looked at the girl with interest. She looked exactly as he had imagined, the heroine from the novel of the same name. The very next day, a couple of boys came to Martin's bakery. The girl, Gemma, chose bread, admiringly inhaling its aroma, while Martin couldn't take his eyes off her. Later, while walking his dog, he happened to meet Gemma again and finally realized that the young woman awakened in him long-forgotten feelings. Late in the evening, Charles knocked on the Zoyers' door. The lights in his house had gone out, and he came to ask for help. Martin agreed and gladly accepted the invitation to drink some wine. The conversation was mostly between Martin's wife and Charles, while the baker kept watching Gemma. In his mind, he recalled lines from the book that Madame Bovary was bored with her quiet family life. That was exactly how the girl looked now. However, the tranquility was suddenly interrupted by a mouse that ran right under Gemma's feet. She screamed and immediately began talking about the need to buy rat poison, which greatly frightened Martin. He warned that accidents often happen because of poison. From that day on, Martin was constantly connected to his neighbor. He either watched her from his window or waited impatiently for her to come to the bakery. One day, he even invited her into the kitchen to try baking bread herself. Martin watched Gemma with lust, admiring every part of her body. During one of her visits to the shop, Gemma met a married couple who invited her and her husband to dinner and offered them jobs. Gemma was an interior artist, and Charlie restored antiques. When dinner came, Martin and Valerie also attended. The hostess took Gemma to the gym, which she wanted to repaint, and made pointed comments about fitness and exercise equipment, clearly implying that Gemma needed to lose a few pounds. This deeply affected the girl. A few days later, Martin met Gemma in the park and complimented her figure. Embarrassed, she hurried to go home, but at that moment, a bee flew under her dress and stung her back. Screaming, she asked for help. With shaking hands, Martin unzipped her dress and caught the insect which had left its sting. He had no choice but to suck out the poison, which the girl readily agreed to. Hearing her screams, a young Frenchman named Hervey, who lived in a nearby mansion, rushed over. While Martin explained what was happening, Gemma fainted. The men took her to the hospital where she was treated. The next day, the English couple visited the Boverys. Looking through a magazine, Gemma noticed a photo of her former fiancé, Patrick, the man who had once cheated on her. Despite everything, Gemma missed him, especially since Charles was always buried in books or busy in the workshop, ignoring things like the faulty ceiling and wiring. Later, Gemma went to the market, once again noticed by Martin as he stood on the bakery porch. Watching her, he silently recited lines from the novel to himself. Suddenly, he saw that Hervey had approached Gemma and struck up a casual conversation. Their next meeting happened at the wine shop, where Hervey recommended the best drink and invited her to visit his centuries-old mansion. On the way home, Martin overtook Gemma's car, but she didn't notice. Just before reaching her house, she turned toward Hervey's estate. Martin followed, but seeing her enter the house, he lost his nerve and drove away. That evening, there was dinner with neighbors. When Gemma sat next to Martin, he noticed a clear imprint of passionate love on her neck, left by the young Frenchman. From that day on, Martin began watching his neighbor more closely. It wasn't difficult. The girl boldly left the house in a dress and heels, disguised as walking the dog. But in reality, she was visiting Hervey. One day at the bakery, Gemma bought a loaf of bread and a croissant but forgot them at the counter. Martin was more than happy for an excuse to visit her, but as he approached the house, he heard passionate moans. Knowing that Charlie had gone to London, Martin realized who was visiting Gemma. He never delivered the forgotten croissant. Instead, he returned home and sat in the kitchen all night pondering his feelings. When Charles returned, returned, the affair between Gemma and Hervey continued. Gemma went on long walks with the dog, and Charles began to suspect that his marriage was falling apart. At Hervey's estate, the couple made love on a table. Gemma accidentally broke a porcelain statue, which was very dear to Hervey's mother. Though upset, he was calmed when Gemma promised to take the statue and ask her husband to restore it, without revealing the owner's name. Martin constantly thought about how to break up Gemma and Hervey. After much thought, he decided to end their affair by any means necessary. The next day, Gemma picked up letters from the mailbox. One of them was supposedly from Hervey, in which he informed her that their relationship was over. Not hiding her feelings from her husband, the girl ran to the Frenchman's house, where he was at that very moment receiving a lecture from his mother. The woman was outraged not only because her son was neglecting his studies, but also because her favorite statuette was missing. At the gates of the estate, Gemma received a message from Hervey saying that he had to return to Paris and wouldn't be able to accompany her to London. Back home, Gemma wanted to talk to her husband, but he already guessed the content of the conversation. He packed his suitcase and left, unable to bear staying with his unfaithful wife. The next day, Gemma meets Martin and asks for his help translating a letter. Once again, the baker stares at the young beauty and struggles to concentrate on the text. Their silence is interrupted by a mouse running past. Martin kills the rodent and notices a bag of rat poison, which causes him to lose his temper. He tells Gemma not to keep poison at home, insisting it's too dangerous. Gemma begins spending her free time at the house of the English neighbors. There, she meets Patrick, who turns out to be a friend of the family. The man is clearly happy to see her and seems eager to rekindle their relationship. The next day, Gemma arranges a meeting with Martin but never shows up. When the baker steps outside, he sees her in Patrick's arms. Later, while sitting in a restaurant with her former fiancé, Gemma admits it was a moment of weakness and that she deeply regrets it. Upon arriving home, Gemma begins packing her things, deciding to sell the house and return to London to mend her relationship with her husband. She finds the repaired statue and leaves Charles a tender voicemail message. Not far from the house, she sees Martin. She apologizes for missing their meeting and invites him over for a farewell drink. During the conversation, it is revealed that Martin was the one who had sent the letter pretending to be from Hervey. Gemma understands the motives behind his actions, and after kissing him, asks him to leave. Sometime later, Martin brings her a basket of freshly baked bread as a parting gift. However, it is not Martin who knocks on the door. It's Patrick, who has come to make one more attempt at a new beginning. While working in the garden, Martin sees a cab pull up to the neighbor's house, and Charlie gets out. The baker is delighted, thinking that things are finally going back to normal. But a few minutes later, Charles runs out of the house, screaming for help. Gemma has passed away. Martin is convinced that rat poison is to blame. However, the coroner states that she died of suffocation, choking on a piece of bread. Feeling responsible, Martin confesses everything to Charlie at the funeral. But Charlie blames himself, saying that when he returned home, he found Patrick and Gemma in a compromising position and confronted them instead of helping his wife. Each man blames himself for what happened. As Martin leaves the cemetery, he turns around and sees Hervey, who has also come to honor the memory of the beloved girl. 6 months later, new neighbors move in, and they immediately spark Martin's interest. But that's another story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.